The big question is, what are some more underrated cars in the Crew 2? What's going on? My name is Sid, and welcome back to Underrated Cars in the Crew 2, a series where I go through some of the cars and make their case. You know, because not every car is the best car in the game. Not every car is the worst car in the game. This thing doesn't have parts on it, so right now, it's probably the worst car in the game. But now it does have parts on it, and this thing is the first car we are starting with. But like I was saying, these won't be the best cars, not the worst cars though. All of the cars that I include on this series have something going for them, right? Something that I clearly think goes overlooked. To begin, is the rough. This thing is so underrated that I have no idea what its name is. It'll be on screen. I don't know. The Rough is the first underrated car on the list in drift specifically. I don't exactly know how to... Is it roof? Is it rough? I'll tell you one thing that isn't rough. The user experience on Surfshark VPN. It's as easy as opening it and there you go. 2 clicks and I'm already connected. Now, Surfshark VPN is genuinely a VPN that I've used for a very long time now. Now, hear me out. A VPN is genuinely something that comes in very handy on the day-to-day. I didn't have a VPN for a very long time. I needed one at school and whatnot for the old blocked content on school Wi-Fi's, not being able to go on basically anything. But eventually, I decided to get a VPN. And obviously, the VPN I went for wasn't Surfshark. I went for a different competitor of Surfshark. And I used that for maybe 2 to 3 months and I couldn't bear it. And eventually, months before I reached out to Surfshark for this partnership right here, I genuinely began using Surfshark as my day-to-day VPN. Not only can you unlock a lot of blocked content, access content from many other countries, because what Surfshark VPN does is it spoofs your internet connection into thinking it's somewhere else, essentially. And another big thing about that is, especially for us gamers, you end up being protected when you're online. Especially using PlayStation with their incredibly lax security, it is so easy for another player to get your IP address and start messing with your Wi-Fi and booting you off and whatnot. But with Surfshark VPN, your IP address stays safe and protected. But of course, I'm not just gonna make you get Surfshark VPN on your own. I'm not gonna force you to have to buy Surfshark VPN full price at least. Because if you click the link in the top of the description, make sure to use that link and code SidW, you get 83% off. But that's not all. Not only am I getting you 83% off with code SidW, but you get an extra 3 free months of Surfshark VPN. If that ain't enough bang for your buck, I don't know what is. So remember, use the link in the description, code SidW for 83% off and 3 free months. Back to the video. But back to this thing. Now it has parts on it. This thing, I feel like it goes so overlooked nowadays. Obviously, Rough themselves they really only have their popularity in racing games because they were specifically tied, Porsche was tied to Need for Speed, which those contracts don't really happen anymore. But Porsche was tied to Need for Speed, so other racing games needed Porsches, so they used Rough because what Rough does is they buy parts from Porsche and then make their own cars, technically, from the spare parts. And the German government considers them a different manufacturer, so it's a weird one. And even though the Crew has Porsche, we still have Rough or Roof. But complicated backstory aside, this thing I genuinely think goes way too overlooked nowadays. You know, there's cars that used to be really good in drift. Like cars that people used to go for in drift, like the RX-7. The RX-7 was for most people the go-to drift car. Way back when, right at the start of the game, because it was the best car to drift normally just drifting. You know, and not for handbrake method, that's definitely the Z4. But those things are definitely not underrated by any means. But there was a massive, massive period of time that I vividly remember. I genuinely, vividly remember this. There was a massive period of time in the Crew 2 on PlayStation where every single drift event was beaten by one guy who had the world record on every single drift event, maybe a year into the game's launch. I don't remember his name. He had a clown profile picture, and he had an unbeatable record. This was before handbrake method in every single drift event with this thing, the rough, or the roof. Although things like the handbrake method, by the way, I have a guide on that, link in description. The handbrake method is still very good, you know, for the average player. This thing is actually still a really good casual drifter, a really good car to just use for normal drifting before you learn the handbrake method. That is, of course, because I think we all know I most definitely recommend the handbrake method over anything. But if you want a really good, underrated drift car that is still very usable and very, very, doable. As you can see, I'm getting 700k points not using handbrake method. Like, that's nuts. Next on the list of underrated cars is the Lancia. Now, if you watched episode 1 of underrated cars, you'll know that one of the cars I showed was the Mustang in Rally Raid. And one of the reasons I liked it, it wasn't the best car in Rally Raid. It's not the fastest by any means necessary. I just liked to drive that car. It looked really cool and really fun to drive. And amongst those cars and that, what is this? That type of underrated car is this thing. The Lancia. I don't think it's the Delta. I don't know what Lancia this is, honestly. God, I am bad with car names today. But this Lancia, I find really fun for just cruising in the open world. I know it's not everyone's forte, but when you're in a game like the Crew 2, when there is so much to do, there's people who sweat, there's people who play summits, there's people who only come on the game to drive a bike for 50 miles and then go off. There's so many different avenues to choose in the Crew 2 that if you want to follow the let me put parts on this thing. This thing feels slow. There's no way it has parts on. There we go. This is a lot more fun. But yes, I genuinely really enjoy cruising in this car. I think it's partly because it's like a real life rallycross car. And I think just personally, I like how this thing looks in real life, I guess. So that translates to the Crew 2. It's not an amazing car for rallycross. It's not the best. But I know there is a big cruising community in the Crew 2. So my pick for an underrated cruising car, at this very moment in time for this episode of Underrated Cars, is most definitely the Lancia, this one. A gorgeous car, and if you can find some good dirt roads, which aren't exactly the hardest to find, especially in the Crew 2 with the most procedurally generated map in existence, they're not the hardest thing to find. You can hop in this thing and just enjoy it. Just enjoy a cruise, honestly. It's always nice to just slow down sometimes, Well, by slow down, I mean just not race. Still go fast when you're cruising if you really want. But there you go. Now, this one has to count as an honorable mention. And it sucks. It really does suck, but it's an honorable mention. And that's the Proto Lucky One. This thing was a Motorpass car. And unfortunately, what that means is you can't get it anymore. Now, my first episode of Underrated Cars was really late into this update, into American Legends 2. And, God, has it been that long since I've done one of these? Wow. So if I did it then, it would make sense, because this thing was free. A lot of people might look over the Motorpass, not care about it. This thing was free. So if you just played the Motorpass, and I could have said, hey, it's underrated, but it's also free, so just go get it quickly, But I ended up taking too long, and you can't get it anymore. But this thing is one of the coolest cars, the coolest unique car, especially, over the Hup 1 or the Hovercrafts. As far as Crew home brands, all creator cars go, the KS Mass Leader, the ice cream truck, the alien van, the Proto Lucky One is up there as a very, very cool car to use. I suppose maybe consider this a call to action in the fact that remember to get your free cars from the Motorpass. Consider this a Motorpass cars as a whole in this episode right here. Because right now, there's a Drift DeLorean that you can get for free if you just do the Motorpass. Remember to do the Motorpass or you'll miss out on cool cars like this. Every single Motorpass has a free car, and every episode 2 Motorpass has a custom-made free car. Like the DeLorean, like this thing, like the KS Mass Leader, like the Chenko Ice Hunter. A bunch of cool cars, but unfortunately this thing specifically, although it's such a sick car, if you have this thing, take it into the home and open its doors. Yeah, it's insane. And it sucks that I'm gonna have to consider it an honorable mention rather than an actual entry. But because of it, we'll enter Motorpass cars. They're pretty sick. There's one free every single update. So you don't have to pay for it. Literally just play and you get it. And no one's gonna be able to get it after it's gone. So really get stuck in. And finally, for Street is the Corvette Grand Sport. Now, why is this thing here? Well, for similar reasons that the S2000 was in the last episode. This is just a not the best, maybe top 10 street cars. It's just a really good street car. You know, there's a couple of cars like this, and you'll probably see more on this series. I'm not going to name another one of them, because that would spoil the other episodes in the series. But this thing is just a pretty good car to use. You know, if you wanted a good JDM car, you go with the S2000. If you want a good... What even is this thing? What, maybe like a muscle car? What does this thing count as? It's Grand Sport, but I think... Ow. I think the game classes it as a muscle car, I want to say. I don't know. If you want a good Chevrolet... go with this thing, the Corvette Grand Sport. It's one of the better cars in street. So, and it's converted. You know, that means you can use the floating toppers and whatnot. Muscle, yeah. So there you go. If you want a good JDM car, you go with the S2000. If you want a good muscle car, then this is your best option. I'm giving you all the options. You know, you don't just have to use the Gallardo. You don't just have to use the Porsche 993, not exclamation mark, best street, that's my stream. But for video watchers, I'll put the link in the description for my best cars in every spec video. But if you don't want the best of the best, but you still want a really good car, the Corvette Grand Sport is a very good one to go with. That's going to be about it from me. Thank you to popular members, special thank you to famous members, insane thank you to star member Hoki, and an insane thank you to icon member Dustin for the love of life. That's about it from me, boys. In a...